Good morning. We'll call this meeting of the Education Conference Committee to order. First things first is that I want to thank the Commissioner Caselius for being here. And Commissioner, if the department wants to come on down to the table. On April 16th, the Commissioner was nice enough to give us a letter and listing out some concerns that were contained in either the House file or the Senate file on this bill, and proactively reached out to us on that. So with regards to that, Senator Olson and I and the conferees got together and addressed, I think there were 8 items on here. We made sure that we omitted those items from the report that is in front of people right now. On the last one regarding the charter school language, there were not specifics on that. So I think some of the charter language is in there, some of it's not. But we'll get further clarification on what those concerns are and what's going forward. Commissioner, I don't know if you want to have other individuals from the department come down. We're going to start going through the bill, or the draft. We'll go through the draft starting on Article 1, starting with Sections 1 through 4. If Mr. Nauman or some, I believe most of this is Senate language, if you want to walk through those first couple of sections up until what I would say the first 4 sections.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members. Mr. Chair, is it your pleasure to go through a detailed explanation of each of the sections, or just say where they came from, or we can do this however you'd prefer?
I would say just a high-level summary, and then if there's additional clarifications wanted by the department or the commissioner, we can drill. Certainly.
So, Mr. Chair and members, a fair portion of Article 1 comes from the MDE policy bill that was carried by Senator Uyghur in the Senate. Section 1 changes the determination of a pupil's district of residence and sets some criteria for that. Section 2 sets an annual assessment performance for non-public students, and it aligns it to the compulsory instruction ages. This was also from the MDE policy bill. Same with Section 3, requires non-public students to comply with district oversight requirements and submit information to the superintendent of the resident district. So those first 3 sections, Mr. Chair, originated from the Senate side, and originally they came from the MDE policy bill.
Thank you. And Mr. McHenry, and you guys want to come up too? Just any comments about the first 4 sections of the bill?
Mr. Chair, members, Kevin McHenry from the Department of Education. Before this is going on, the one thing I just did want to raise is that we did indicate with the staff that there was a time commitment for the commissioner at 9 a.m. We were under the impression that you were asking for her to give the testimony on this. We could have her do that. Obviously, we're going to be available here throughout the entire day moving forward. But as if we're going section by section, she may not be available here before that 9 a.m. time. So I'm wondering if maybe it might be okay if she could go through her testimony. And we're also going to be available here if the nonpartisan staff is going through the bill, and we can be of assistance in that manner if that is okay with you all.
Sure. Well, Mr. McHenry, are you authorized to sign off on stuff as we go through this and pass this stuff today, or do we need the commissioner here?
Mr. Chair, members, Commissioner Caselius is going to be available throughout the entire day. I am here to obviously, speak on her behalf as she goes to her engagement that she needs to be at. Obviously, she's going to be available afterwards, so we're going to be working closely on that. We'll be here at the entire time.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner,
if I could speak. Brenda Caselius, Commissioner of Education. I do have some prepared comments on some of the articles. I do have to give a welcome at an event that we have been planning for several months. Then I am more than able to come right back after that to answer questions and to be here available as you walk through the bill. And then I need to leave again, go back to the event, and welcome the governor and introduce him, and then come back. And then I also have to give the closing of the event. This is an event that we've had planned for a very long time with our minority councils around closing of the achievement gap and strategies. And so those are my time commitments at 9, again at 1, and then again at 4:30. But it's at the Humanities Center, and I'm glad to be going back and forth today to address any concerns.
Well, the department will still be here as we're taking action on the individual sections. Mr. McHenry, and I'm assuming that if there's objections to language that we're adopting, we'll know about it before we pass individual sections.
Absolutely, we'll be able to give you feedback on those sections, and I'd like to give my testimony now, if it's okay with you, Mr.
Sure,
Chair.
Commissioner, go ahead. Proceed with your
Thank you.
testimony.
Good morning, Chair Olson and Chair Garofalo and the entire committee and members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this morning to discuss the conference report, and thanks again for all of your work throughout this session. My staff and I have worked late into the night and early this morning to thoroughly review this conference report in order to provide you with the comprehensive feedback on the provisions it contains. I very much appreciate your efforts to address the concerns that me and my staff have brought forth throughout this session, and also in my most recent letter that you mentioned, Chairman Garofalo, on Monday. As I've stated on many occasions over the past year and a half, as evidenced by our work to enact substantial reforms last year, I remain committed to finding areas of common ground, as does the Governor, where we can find agreement. My review of the conference report has identified some remaining concerns, and I'd like to see these addressed today if possible. Article 1, Sections 4 and 5. We've had great discussions with both Representative Kyle and Senator Stump regarding use of CTE courses to satisfy the new chemistry and physics course requirements. While we all share the same goal that students should be able to use CTE courses to fulfill those requirements, we believe the language could be clearer, and we have brought suggested language we believe all parties could agree to. Section 8. Staff identified a need for a technical fix in this section. On page 7, line 434, after fiscal, the word second should be added. This creates consistency between the application and the request for payment timeframes in subdivision 2 and 3. Also, there could be a tax issue here with reporting the award as income and needing to issue a 1099. We'd encourage you to speak with the Department of Revenue to clarify the need for a 1099 and how that might be issued.
And Commissioner, just because I see staff frantically writing your testimony down, do you the suggestions you have, we going to get those in writing as well?
Sure, these are my notes, but I'd be sure to make sure that we have those point by point for you.
Senator Olson.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I believe the language we have here is the language that came from the department. So you're saying that you're disagreeing with the language that the department
have Tom.
but there's some more changes that need to be made?
I'll ask Tom to speak to the particulars on this one.
Well, we all know that Tom Melcher is never wrong, so welcome to the committee, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Tom Melcher with the Department of Education. I think when this language came to the committee, the department originally had a 1-year period, and it was changed to 2 years, but it was changed to 2 years for the application piece, but it remained 1 year for the verification. So we just need to move the verification back to 2 years so that the two pieces are consistent.
Thank you, Dr. Melcher. Commissioner, if you want to continue, and you might want to stick around here because you never know when we're going to have a question for you.
And then again, just the issue of the 1099, making sure that we address that. Sections 13 and 17. While we have been vocal in our support of increased opportunities to CTE classes in PSEO, we find the addition of private, for-profit higher education institutions as new PSEO providers problematic. There has been much research that shows that the harm to a student who enters college program without being ready could have some difficulties. We have no assurance that these programs will be quality programs and that they will have the capacity to properly assess the readiness of a student to enter PSEO. We would be more comfortable with this section if it was limited to currently eligible institutions only. Sections 15 and 26. These provisions allow PSEO providers to advertise on financial grounds to students. I believe students should be making their PSEO choices based on the information shared with them by their school and in consultation with their parents, not based upon an attractive and potentially deceiving advertisement. There's language in House File 2025, fourth engrossment, that we feel could be suitable compromise for all parties. Section.
Oh, just one second, Commissioner. Senator Olson.
Could you give us some idea of what that language is, or is it available to us? Because as we're going through this, we are going to be trying to take some action.
Senator.
And so it would be helpful to know that if it's that advertising thing just seems like it is a it's an unusual thing to single out the higher education institutions that they cannot make any reference to the fact that there might be some savings for doing this, and it's not, we're not taking the right to have a brochure on the subject, but that it in fact may include the fact that there is some potential savings to the family, and it just seems like it's the wrong thing for us to be doing in public policy. That's why I'd be interested in what language you have, if it changes the intent of it, or if it is, if it is just something to clarify.
Commissioner, I think what you mean is that the language that we're striking in this bill on sections 15 and 26, that the language would be unstricken, if there is such a word. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that my staff could work with you on the specifics of that language in House File 2025. They have it here, and I'll be glad to have them work with you on that language.
And
Senator Olson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, so you have new language that would accomplish similar things but do it in a better fashion? Or are you just wanting this eliminated?
Senator Olson, I believe that we have language where we could find compromise on that issue.
I'd like to see it.
Section 27, I have spoken with the governor's office on this provision, and I believe that they're continuing to engage in these discussions and with you and address all outstanding issues on that concern. Section 29.
Section 27.
27?
That's the military pay.
I think that they're working across agencies to address that issue.
Okay. Just, Commissioner, that was language that Representative Pawlowski had brought with Representative Detmer to us. We were under the understanding that had come from Veterans Affairs. If that's not correct, if staff could just let us know later, that's where those changes in the language came from. So, Commissioner, continue.
Chair, I believe that there's multiple interests in this, and so we would just want to make sure that we're aligned with all of the bills that are coming through with that section. Section 29, I have two concerns about this section. One is the purpose and need for it. Still needs to be clarified. And also who pays the other 45% that's delineated in there. So I want to be able to just really understand this section a little bit better.
Sure. Commissioner, the loud, outspoken nature of our Senate staff here wishes to offer. I'm kidding. It's a joke. That's why I said it. Mr. Nauman, did you have a quick comment for us on issue of clarification?
Mr. Chair and members, I apologize.
No. It was. Me, I'm a shy guy. I prefer to keep.
I do, Mr. Chair. This provision, Section 29, relates to Senator Olson's Senate File 1531, which places a 55% proration on the payments to the higher education institutions for 10th graders enrolled in career and tech for 1 year only. It's a budget balancing endeavor coming through the Senate Finance Committee.
Right. Senator Olson.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Nauman, it actually, the higher ed institutions are getting less than the amount that student is generating for the regular school program. And it primarily affects, because the opportunity is essentially to take one course as a test, and it's generally the fact that if it's not available, as you may recall, the package that we have removed because we haven't resolved the levy impact, that we wanted to have our secondary schools to be able to continue, not to have to drop off more of their career and tech programs or possibly reinstate them, so that they can deliver this in the schools. And we've shown from data that came from your department that young people who are taking these at least a year of a program, which is about 200 hours, equivalent of an hour a day. It may not be an hour a day depending on how it's arranged. There's a 97.12 graduation rate. That's pretty high. And that it says that they're staying in school instead of dropping out, and they are taking the other academic classes and that to fulfill their requirements. So we wanted to balance that with when those opportunities don't exist, to be able to take advantage of a post-secondary enrollment option. And that's where the financing of it even is is hopefully it's not going to be a deterrent to the MnSCU system accepting that. But that's what we want. And you brought up your concern about the proprietary. That only kicks in if the MnSCU system refuses. So, it's again, there may be a way of clarifying too that it's not opening the door to things that are already available to them through their high school in terms of that encouragement. We're not trying to promote that as an option, but maybe a little bit of push to MnSCU because of the breadth of programming they have, to be sure that they make that, take advantage of that, and allow a student that may not have been succeeding in an academic model to be able to get turned on again to the value of some of those academics and seeing how that knowledge is used.
Yeah.
Mr. Nauman,
Senator Olson.
Just one second, Commissioner. Mr. Nauman, did you want to add something?
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to be clear that this limit is placed only on 10th graders enrolling in the new career and tech endeavor that's part of the overall package. So it doesn't place any limit on those students that are already eligible under other sections of law in career and tech. Okay. Or, I mean, in PSEO, rather. And it's for 1 year.
And it's just for fiscal year 13?
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Senator Olson? I'm sorry, Commissioner.
While I'm wound up, I want to go back to that advertising statement. I'm anxious to see your wording of it because Secretary Duncan had made the comment to the fact that he highlighted the tuition savings. So if he can say it, why can't the colleges mention that there can be a tuition savings for if they are in fact taking this? So I hope that we don't get too particular there, because I think that whole effort, as you know, has moved our secondary schools to add a great deal of rigor to their program. And so this is not trying to suggest that colleges are trying to woo all of the high school students away, because I don't think that's the case. But anyway, I'm anxious to hear that. But if Secretary Duncan can come and advertise it, but the colleges can't say it, that seems a little strange.
Commissioner Cassellius.
Senator Olson, thank you. And I can hear your passion in your voice on CTE, and I share that same passion, as you know. I just want to be clear that we don't have some unintended consequences with the MnSCU system, because they did take huge higher ed cuts last year, and actually over the past 10 years, and I just wouldn't want it to have an unintended consequence of deterring them from accepting our PSEO students in the future. And so as we think about these new policies, just thinking about those consequences as well, and that cost sharing, and how that might work out with that other 45%, and how that might impact them financially to be able to offer PSEO.
And Ms. Commissioner, before you continue, are the mics on? Can you guys hear everybody?
No. It's very
Can you turn the volume?
Is there a volume button?
I think there's like a volume switch over there. You can probably turn up a little bit.
In the center.
I'd like to think I was a techie, but...
So do I. I'd like to think I was, too.
I know you challenged me to a Halo game or something like that.
There we go. That's better. Is that better now?
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
All right, so
Now-
Commissioner,
now-
if you could just start over from the beginning and go. No. Please continue your testimony, Commissioner.
Okay. So in Section 30, this again is addressing PSEO language, and if there can be agreement, and if we can work with you on agreement on what that language is, I don't think that there's a need for a task force. As you know, we've been managing several task force. It's put quite a burden on the agency in terms of managing these, although the recommendations have come forward, have been very good ones, and it has been a good process to engage our public and our stakeholders, and we appreciate that. However, if we can get some agreement on that language, I don't think there's a need for the task force and the provision of Section 30.
Commissioner, Senator Olson would like to add
Mr.
additional
Chairman and
Senator
Commissioner, I know you have said, and I appreciate you repeating it again, that you share that concern and Senator Stump's on the career and tech area, but we haven't seen any kinds of suggestions. We have some proposals to move forward, because you get tired of waiting, especially when you know that things work. Trying to open those doors. Now, this was the task force was the provision that was in the House bill. I was planning on trying to rework. I think the mission is a little bit too global for what I think is actually needed. But you're suggesting that you don't think it's needed at all?
Commissioner Caselius.
Senator Olson, I want to assure you that this is an issue, and Senator Stump as well, and others who also care deeply about this issue, and we are actually working on it. I've been working with Larry Pogamiller, also in higher ed, and also with Minshew Chancellor Rosenstone on provisions around CTE. We think we're going to be bringing a much larger proposal in the future that we'll be working on. We may or may not use a task force type of method, but once you put in language task force, it implies a process and stipends and those kinds of things, and of which we don't have funding to do that. And so it has become difficult in managing the multiple task forces that we have at the agency and trying to pay mileage and lunch and all of those provisions and things. So we still plan on doing the work. It's just having it legislated, we'll still do it.
Senator Olson.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we're not trying to drive wedges, but you're obviously supporting the Senate position.
Well done, well played. Commissioner, please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Section 31, while we aren't opposed to sharing this information with the legislature, this report will take a somewhat significant portion of staff time, again, to assemble. Our federal accountability staff are paid fully with federal dollars, and as you know, the agency is 60-40 federally funded. And those staff and those dollars cannot be used to create a report that is only required under state law. We are working with our accountability staff to determine if there are other ways to provide this information that would be acceptable to you and also under our federal requirements. Section 32, Subdivision 3. I certainly understand the difficulty that Bemidji is experiencing pupil transportation. And I believe that transportation is an issue for all our rural districts and does put quite a large stress on them. But rather than provide a fix for this one district, I would encourage the committee to explore a structural funding fix overall that addresses the needs of all our districts experiencing similar difficulties. Subdivision 4, while I appreciate Chair Garofalo funding the additional costs that would be borne by MDE under Representative Myro's digital learning bill, those costs originate from the course requirement mandate portion of the bill that MDE and I and the governor do not support. So I wanted to just be able to point that out. Moving on to Article 2, Section 8. I appreciate all the work that's been done on this bill as it's been moving forward, and it's looking to build off the site-governed school statute. Subdivision 1A outlines parameters of what could be contained in an agreement.
Commissioner, can you give us a page just so it's a little bit quicker?
Page 28. 29, sorry.
What page are we on?
29.
29.
Section 8, Article 2.
Okay.
These decisions should be determined and worked out at the local level rather than under provisions set forth by the state. Subdivision is duplicative and addressed later in the statute. And Subdivision 4A contains language that is vague, stating that a district must seek to establish similar contracts, and schools already can collaborate in this manner without additional language. Section 12, this provision requires charter contracts to include a dispute resolution process between the authorizer and charter school that involves a neutral party. A dispute resolution process could diminish an authorizer's ability to effectively enforce their contract if a school has the ability to invoke a dispute resolution process anytime they are unsatisfied with an authorizer's oversight or intervention decisions. And finally, authorizers and schools could incur significant costs with this process. I also want to point out that I have concerns regarding lengthening an initial approval from 3 to 5 years. Section 13, testimony on this bill centered on the High School for Center Recording Arts and their concern of being identified as a priority or focus school under NCLB waiver. This legislation does not address their concern. MDE has worked with the U.S. Department of Education to satisfy the concerns of HSRA and other credit recovery schools without running afoul of federal accountability. And my staff has met with them extensively to try to assure them of that fact. Section 17, collaboration is again already allowed under the law. and should be locally determined. The main change allows the district to include...
Commissioner, just really quick. Sorry. Senator Olson had a quick question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, regarding the Section 13, that, I think was given fairly careful consideration. I'm not sure if that was in your House bill or not, but it certainly had broad bipartisan support in the Senate, and I'm not sure I grasped what you said was the problem with it. The language of the graduation incentives program, that's the participation in it with the charter school, having them designated as graduation incentives as the charter school in order to be treated in the same way with this data.
Commissioner Cassellius.
Senator Olson, Chairman Garofalo. The issue here is around expectations for students and the standards that we set for all students. In my opinion, I believe that all students ought to meet our standards and ought to be held to the same level of accountability for exiting, so that when a diploma means the same thing. However, I believe that the support that we provide to those students ought to be different. And so it's not a lowering of the standard or the expectation or the accountability for the school, but it's around how do we support those students in achieving the standard that we set for everybody and what's expected in terms of what we say a diploma means in Minnesota. And so that's the thinking behind that. Even though they've experienced difficulty, there are students who have experienced difficulty in all of our schools, but yet we still want the same expectations for all our students.
Senator Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that can be difficult to grasp, but when you talk with some of the students that are there that are being tremendously successful in achieving, employability, you talk about career ready, whatever, and are graduating, it isn't that they aren't gaining a lot of the efforts toward those standards, but they don't function in quite the same way. And for schools to be shut down that are actually saving kids from just being out on the street, if you will, and turning them into some productive citizens, there's got to be a way, and this seemed to be a tool and a way of being able to deal with this that was fair to what they're able to accomplish in the lives of these students. So I would hope we could have some further discussion of that. I don't know if there's any others that have some concern.
Sure, Senator Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner, we heard this particular bill in pretty late in the process. It was a Senator Harrington bill, and the students came forward and shared their stories, and everybody on the committee was very inspired by the gains they were making and by the alternative approach that this School of Recording Arts, for example, was using to make sure these kids not only were successful, but were extraordinarily successful in their own talent and endeavors. And so this particular provision accomplished their ability to continue that. So I think the concern that you're hearing from Senator Olson and that I would share is what do you propose?
Well, it sounds like, Commissioner, that sounds like the department is working with the school, and maybe you're being told the school was telling us that there needed to be legislative action. You were under the impression that the department was addressing this, and maybe that's something we should continue the conversation on. Is that correct, Commissioner?
Yeah, Chairman Garofalo, Senator Bonoff, and Senator Olson, I care about these kids the exact same way that you do, and we want to find a resolution to how we can do this. This particular language and legislation does not impact the outcomes of the NCLB waiver and how the school might or might not be labeled. And so I just want to be clear with that. But I will absolutely have Kevin and others work with you around language and around this legislation, because it doesn't match, I think, the intent of what was being asked directly for it to be done.
So, Mr. Chairman, and I have to mention, if I'm not mistaken, Senator Chamberlain, who is kind of a tough one to convince of something, was kind of blown away and kind of almost led the charge to honor their request and seeing what they're doing. Am I misinterpreting your position,
Senator Chamberlain?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Cassellius, it just seemed that, as Senator Bonoff was saying, that these kids they were stuck in a trap, and the school was just trying to find the best way out of that predicament. But the bureaucratic language and the processes weren't allowing for that, so they're just trying to get through to that, make that work, and that's all we would like to see, is make sure it was working for them, and we don't want to wreck that.
So if you want to proceed with, we left off at section, I think, section 16. 17 is where you had listed out, you were listing some concerns with section 17.
Yep. All right, I'll continue. Thank you, Senator Chamberlain, too. Collaboration is already, section 17, collaboration is already allowed under law and should be locally determined. The main change allows the district to include, for purposes of student assessment and reporting to the state, the academic performance of students attending a collaborative charter school site operating within the geographic boundaries of the district. We believe that this is not consistent with the inherent spirit of the current provisions of the state's charter law, and that grants charters complete autonomy. And further discussion, I think, is needed on that provision around charter autonomy. Section 20, paragraph J, this is setting a new precedent that creates a new levy and contains a property tax increase. This could lead to larger levies later and increases for other districts. Section 22, this, and I realize I'm going fast. I apologize that I have to be at the welcome at 9. Section 22, this issue should be addressed in a comprehensive manner and not just one portion of those affected. This law could have an adverse effect on nearly 400 classroom teachers who are currently teaching, and another 1,100 with licenses pending. The bigger issue here is the test itself, I believe. And the Board of Teaching should be directed to examine the effectiveness of the MTLE and whether the tool is working to ensure we have the most effective teachers and not just the best test takers. Furthermore, several concerns that have been identified by other parties, including Article 2, Sections 5 and 7, that must be vetted more carefully to determine if we can find comfort in their inclusion. I'm on record as believing that change can happen quickly if it's strategic and collaborative and grounded in research and best practice. But I also believe that we cannot bulldoze change. We must work to bring all voices to the table in order to create a sense of shared responsibility and accountability, as the Governor stated in his State of the State address. I encourage you to continue to publicly hear and discuss those additional concerns in order to bring about the greatest degree of consensus. And finally, I'd reiterate my preference that those items that have virtually unanimous and bipartisan support run separately and quickly to have the best chance of getting signed by the Governor. It would be troubling and problematic if larger provisions were not, or provisions that we could pass were not enacted, and that could actually benefit our students and minimize disruption for teachers and districts. Again, thank you for your public service on behalf of Minnesotans and for the opportunity to testify here for my concerns today. As always, I remain ready and willing to continue working to resolve our differences in order to benefit our schools and our students. And if your goal is to pass some of the provisions here today and pass a report today, again, I am available, my staff is available, and I'll work out remaining issues throughout the day, going back and forth. And please do not hesitate to contact me or my staff, and they'll be here to answer questions in my absence.
Senator Olson.
Mr. Chairman, I lost you when you appeared to move on to something beyond that teacher test. Basic skills test, and I thought you were referring to something relative to it, but apparently not. And where you went after that, I just missed.
Was it Article 2, Sections 5 and 7?
I think she's speaking to Section 22 about the basic skills test, the MTLE.
Then where did you go?
Senator Olson.
Then where did you go after that?
Oh yes, Article 2, Sections 5 and 7.
Okay, so you backed up.
There are some other provisions that we just believe maybe should be vetted and more discussion on.
Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 2. Oh, okay. Yeah, that was the Section 7 was the bill that was stripped down of Senator Thompson's bill in terms of the use of the political purpose. the school time. Section 5 was what?
Just the date change, the July 1st
Probationary period of just going to July 1st from June 1st. I just want to make one comment on this one-year license issue. You know, if we'd left the bill the way it started, this has been a 2-year thing, and you know, it was changed in conference committee from being a test before teachers started their teacher preparation, so that they didn't get down that path, spend all that money, and not able to meet basic skill standards. If we'd left it there, we wouldn't be having all of this trouble. But there was some change. There were some changes made that you didn't like, and so the bill was vetoed last year. Now it came back this year, and it has gone through various machinations, and it was signed by the governor. And then, after all this time, we learned that all of the consequences. Where in the world was everybody? I have said this to some of my superintendents, that you know, particularly one that has these immersion programs, you know, where were you when it could have been dealt with? But the trouble is that pushing it back into closer to the readiness to the classroom. Are you suggesting that you repeal the thing and just leave things the way they are?
Senator Olson, Chairman Garofalo, I very much appreciate your comments, and we all believe in high standards for teachers. I think that's why it got such great bipartisan support, and we all don't want to see teachers waste money or have teachers in the classroom who are not effective. I think when we were working through the provisions of this bill and the veto and then it being reintroduced, we talked about an appeal process, because I did believe that there would be some additional concerns that might come up for certain groups of teachers or other teachers, but that was not acceptable at the time. To create an appeal process. So it did pass with broad bipartisan support. With my understanding, I knew that these issues would come up, and I did bring that to the attention of the authors. I do believe now, though, that rather than a certain carve-out for some teachers, we have multiple teachers, and I've been hearing from superintendents, as you have, and I think a 1-year waiver would be prudent, not to do away with the law, but to have a 1-year waiver from the law, so that the Board of Teaching could examine this exam. It is clearly known that this is no longer a basic skills test. This is not the old praxis test that was given. This is a much more rigorous exam, but I believe that the Board of Teaching could look at this exam, look at the cut scores on the exam, look at how many teachers are passing, not passing, examine the cost of this exam to constantly retake it, the feedback that's given to teachers or not given to teachers. I just think that it merits review for the tool that's being used to measure our teachers' effectiveness.
Senator Olson.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, are you just suggesting that we change the effective date?
Yes, I'm suggesting that having
Delay it a year?
Delay, yes, ma'am.
Representative Loon.
For everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Commissioner, thank you very much for being here. And we were on the topic of the basic skills, and that was an amendment that I put into the House language, and I would hope that we could continue to work on something. I think, again, some of these consequences perhaps were not brought to light before it was passed. And I do think that the language immersion programs and those teachers that generally are sought from other countries, just because we cannot find the teachers here that are native language speakers in languages like Chinese and others that are a little harder to come by, is a unique circumstance. So whether we address it strictly through this or some other manner with working with the Board of Teaching, I think this is something we're going to have to continue to work with. I wanted to ask you about another issue while we have you here. There was language in both the House and Senate bills with regards to an early childhood early literacy program, and I understand the department has some concerns about it. It was a grant for $250,000, and so the delete all that we're talking about today does not have the language in it. But I'm wondering what your perspective is, if there would be some area of agreement that we could come to. I think the program itself, from both hearings in the House, and it's my understanding, I won't speak for the Senate, but there was support there, that it is a very good program, one of high quality, which I think is a goal of all of us, but one that is engages the parents with the children. It's got a great track record of success. So I'm wondering if there is some support, at least for the program, or finding some way to provide some funds or continue that effort through this legislation.
Commissioner Casilius.
Chairman Graffo, Representative Loon, I want the entire committee to understand our focus and our commitment and priority to early literacy, early learning. This has been something we have championed this past year. It's absolutely essential if we want to close the achievement gaps. So yes, I do support moving forward with any kinds of scholarships, programming, internships. The issue here is around the funding. And trying to find funding. If there were some suggestions for how the chairs would like to find funding and work with the members of this, I think that we would support early literacy initiatives and programs and expansion, and anything we can do to get our children earlier will help us close the achievement gap. So, but I think it's the resolving of the funding of it and not going back on the promises we already made last session for scholarships and literacy aid. So that to me right now is the issue. So I think if that can be worked out, that is acceptable.
Representative Lynn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. I very much appreciate that. I'm heartened by those comments. I know, we fought, many of us fought hard to get the money that we could in the budget last year for early childhood. Since that time, we've also, with your leadership, gotten the Race to the Top fund. So we do actually have more money than I think any of us hoped we would have for early childhood. So I'm hoping that we can, again, find somewhere in here this little bit of money for, again, this very, I think, a very, very good program that reaches even younger children and engages their parents in preparing those children to be successful in school, which is something we all want to encourage. So,
thank you.
Senator Olson.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I appreciate Representative Loon's statements here, because I think the Senate was very much in agreement, and I would just like to defend the use of those particular funds in this direction, and quote from your recent memo of some additional concerns that you'd like to encourage districts to focus their spending on any increased school fund dollars on 3 specific items that were highlighted in the governor's 7-point plan for improving education. And the first one is increasing access to quality early childhood education options. And I think this one is not an institutional-based one. So it is, the scholarship actually is one that brings the service into the home, that works with the child. It's a different way of looking at it. And I think sometimes that kind of builds up a wall, because we seem to be thinking in terms of one way of delivery. And this one has a proven track record, which is what impresses me, is that we don't just stop throwing money at things that we don't know whether they work or not, and hoping for the best. When we have things that work, that's where we should be investing our money. And this was an option of taking what the legislature had approved, and they have both approved this action, both on the House and Senate side, to use a portion of that to expand a very effective program that has enough of a track record so that we're seeing the results that it has. And so, the results-oriented kinds of approaches to doing that is what it would convince me that this was appropriate to do that. And so I would appreciate your rethinking that, because it's obvious that some of us would like to bring that back, and I don't see why that endangers any of the scholarship issues that you're talking about. But it certainly does have a proven track record. And that's why I think that it would be important to include that. But that was in your first list to take out, and so we did not put it in here.
Senator Bonhoff, and then Stump.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if now is the time or not, but I actually had an amendment to that point to reconsider, and I actually did just leave it as a general fund, given that I thought, as I understood it, that if you look at the spreadsheet, there is actually ends up to be some savings based on the way we've done other things in the bill, so there would actually end up being enough on the bottom line that we could offer that grant. And so, Mr. Chair, it's up to you, but when you're going to, or if you're going to entertain amendments, but I do have one drawn up that's very simple that in fact reinstates that program.
Why don't we, we'll wrap up with the commissioner here and
Thank
we'll
you.
discuss that later. Senator Stump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to make a comment on the achievement gap and what I think I see happening. And, you know, I totally agree with the early learning investments. And I think that has a lot to do how we're going to close that achievement gap. But I think there's a couple of other components besides the early learning investments. I think the other one is I think we need a broad array of programs in our education institutions, our school districts. And that's what I think the last couple of years we've tried to look at, is that when you swing too far, let's say one way, you miss students on the other extreme. And so I think the education system in the state has to recognize that not every student, not every child has, we're going to run them down a single lane or a chute and they're going to become educated. And the third component that I think we have gone overboard on is testing. And testing is, the easiest approach to testing is to have one standardized test and just run everybody through that. The trouble with that is that not everybody's the same.
Right.
And I think we have to recognize that an educated person can be wise, can do well in life without having to meet certain levels on these tests. And I don't think we're going to close the achievement gap until we recognize that early learning is essential, that we need a broad array of programs from the arts all the way over to the technical skills, and that we have to be flexible enough in our testing that we can grant, if you want to call it diplomas or whatever you want to call that, recognition of graduation, that there's some flexibility in that testing. And I just think that we have, I think in the bill there's components of that, of trying to recognize that. And that's what we want to work with.
Thank you, Senator Stump. Commissioner, just I know you have to leave here like in a matter of minutes. Am I correct in saying this is a complete list of concerns with the draft we have up?
Yes, these are my concerns.
Okay. And then just a suggestion regarding the early childhood scholarships, and I will not move this unless you're in favor of this, is that right now the scholarships are set to be $4 million in fiscal year 13, and then we drop to $2 million in 14 and 15. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to take half the scholarships away after fiscal year 13, spending the same amount of money but doing it in a $2 million in fiscal year 13 and then $3 million in 14 and 15 is probably a more stable and productive way for us to ramp up the program. Again, I'm not going to move that change unless you're in favor of it, but I would just ask you to please keep that under advisement and consider it. Instead of going 4-2-2, go 2-3-3. So, any closing comments, Commissioner, or response to Senator Stump or Senator Olson or Senator Bonner?
Well, Senator Stump, I think we're in great agreement, and again, wisdom coming from this table, and I just appreciate everybody's comments and your focus on early learning, your focus on literacy, your focus on having great teachers, and accountability. Those are the things that are going to make a difference for our kids and for our achievement, and that's what we've tried to lay out in our 7-point plan. I thank you for your time today. I'll be available again if you need me in about an hour, so please just let my staff know, and they'll be here in my absence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And do you have I took notes, I'm sure lots of people did, but do you have your testimony in writing that Mr. McNary can provide us?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. And we'll be recessed. The committee will be recessing to the call of the chair later, Commissioner, so stay tuned to when we can get back together. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator
just a comment. Would it be possible for the members of the conference committee to also get a copy of the those suggestions.
Think we can dispatch someone to make a copy of that handout in front of you? Is that possible, Mr. McHenry?
Mr. Chair, members, absolutely. We'll get an email out to you all with copies of this.
Do we have a page you can, want to copy it right now so we can have it? We have people who can.
Sure.
Okay, so if we have someone, Rebecca, you want to, great. Okay, so, and maybe what we should do is take a brief recess until we get copies of this to everyone, and then we can move through and start adopting those sections where there's agreement on, Senator. Is that okay with you? Okay, so members, we'll take a brief recess to the call of the chair. Don't get lost, but I would imagine 5 or 7 minutes. Recess to the call of the chair. Thank you.
Normally, good chairs.